Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming out. Thank you to our sponsors, Mary Ellen. I had a cup of coffee this morning, absolutely delicious. So thank you. Usually I don't have my coffee till after, so apologies if I go really fast. But I am so delighted to welcome Safa Zaki here to Like a Boss at the Roux Institute. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And congratulations to you as the first woman president of Bowden College. The history of Bowden is akin to the history of Maine, and that is just quite an accomplishment considering that college was founded 230 years ago. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
So the class of 2024 was really the first class that you graduated. How did that feel?
So when you work in a college, one of the things you do is you try to support the students in their trajectory through that time, but also through the time that will come in their future. And the commencement is a moment where you celebrate the time together, but also what this class will do. This was the first class that I got a chance to see this end part. So it was their last year at Bowden, my first year. They were so good to me. And so there was that personal feeling of knowing these kids, but also knowing what they were going to do, how they're going to go out and change the world. As I meet alumni, it's amazing what people do with this sort of education, and I'm so glad to play a role in it.
One of the things that we've been in touch on was the release of Evan Gerskovich, who was a Bowden grad, and that was just such a happy moment, and Bowden kept such a spotlight on him. Any plans for him to come to Bowden? I know he's got a lot to do right now.
We would so love to have him at Bowden. I remember the day of his release, walking through campus, and people were stopping me every few minutes saying, "Did you hear the news? Did you hear the news?" There was so much excitement. We had been, as you say, trying to keep the spotlight on his detention, and the campus is just waiting for him to come back, and we are ready for him whenever he's ready.
Yeah, it's such an uplifting story, and can't wait to hear more about that.
I can't wait to meet him. I haven't met him yet.
So let's talk about your path to Maine, which is a really, really unique one, and talk about where you grew up.
So I'm from Egypt, and we lived in 6 different countries growing up. So I lived in Egypt, but also Jordan and Syria and Tanzania and Trinidad and Tobago, and then I went to the U.S. for graduate. So I went back to Egypt for my undergraduate education at the American University in Cairo, and then I applied to graduate in the U.S. and I went to Arizona State University, and from there I was on the job market. I did a postdoc at National Institute of Mental Health postdoc at Indiana University, which was a big deal for me. I really wanted this job. And then I was on the job market, and a friend of mine was interested in this school called Williams. I had never heard of it, or any of these other schools. I mean, it's important to say that, because I think these schools are very well known by a segment of the population, but not the whole population. And I was certainly on the outside looking in. So he wanted this job, and I thought, well, if he wants it, it must be a good job. So I applied. We are still good friends, by the way. He is doing amazing things. He's world famous. Anyway, I got the job, and I didn't know. I actually got to the hotel in Williamstown. I called my husband. I said, there's no way. I'm not taking this. It's like this tiny little town. We'd gone through I'm looking at one of my old students in the audience from Williams. Anyway, but there was something about this model of education that really drew me. The fact that you get to spend so much time with students, the fact that you are a partner in their learning, but they are adding to your education as well. Those were really compelling pieces of this kind of education. So that's where I was for 21 years.
Oh, at 20, oh.
21 years.
I
yeah.
should have known that. So before we jump to Bowden, let's go back a little bit and talk about, what was your first job?
So I think it was babysitting, although I can't remember what came first. I had my sister and I ran a little business out of my parents' kitchen. We had a baking business, and it was around the same time, but I spent also a lot of time babysitting, so let's go with babysitting.
What did you bake?
We had 5 things on the menu, and people could order these in advance, and then we would rush home and bake these things. So I can give you the list if you want.
Well, I think people are curious.
So there's a black midnight cake, pistachio rum cake, and there were brownies, there were blondies, and then there was this fruit cake. I don't remember what it was called, but it was a sort of fruit and nut cake.
Now, we're going to talk more about the food at Bowden, but
Yes.
are any of those items on the menu at Bowden? Because they should be.
They should
be.
Well, I will say it's hard to top the food at Bowden.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I do know that Bowden has this great program where students can bring in recipes and they'll actually make them.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Well, we're coming over. Tell us what time. So one of the things you told me about your babysitting gig was that was really how you got interested in psychology. How did that all happen?
So there was okay, this is where you're going to find out how much of a nerd I was, but, or I am actually, I should just come out with that. There was an intro to psychology book in this person who I babysat for their kid, and I just loved reading it. I wanted to go back to babysit so that I could read the rest of it.
Yeah, see, I would read People magazine when I would babysit, so that's, a celebrity nerd, right? So that's great. And you didn't think to ask to borrow the book?
I did not.
Do you guys need to go out again? Because I'm only on chapter 3. But I mean, that really led you into your field of study.
It really did. So I knew before going to college that I was going to be a psychology major. Yeah.
And you also shared a memory with me about your family meetings.
Yes. So everybody has things in their family that they know now that they're adults are unusual. For us, for me and my siblings, it was the fact that we got together on a regular basis with my parents, who would go through the family accounts with us, tell us how much everybody earned, what the food cost, what the rent cost, and then we would actually have to submit budgets for, I know it sounds crazy, but when we would get to a place where we could do some shopping, buy some clothes, because it wasn't everywhere we lived, they would say, okay, create a budget, and estimate how much each of these things are, and then they would give us, we would have to make an argument for it. But it really wasn't until I grew up I realized that this was just not typical. Let's go with typical.
But it must give you an edge in budget meetings at Bowden.
I remember when I first got to Williams, one of my first committee assignments was on the budget committee. And it really kind of felt like home. I was like, oh, I know this.
So tell us a little bit about your research.
I study how people look at things and know what they are, which is fundamentally human. We do this all the time. We do it thousands of times in a day. And we do it so well that it feels like there's nothing to it. But when you try to build machines that do what humans do, when you try to build models or computational models that do what humans do, you realize that there's a really sophisticated architecture that's behind this process. And my research has been to build those models and compare the output of the models to what humans do. And the models are always wrong in some way. The question is, how are they wrong, and what does that tell us about human architecture?
And while you were at Williams, you were both the dean of faculty, but also teaching at the same time, correct? So
Yeah.
how did that prepare you for the move to Bowden?
So most of the time that I was at Williams, I was a professor and not dean. But I had done a lot of, so I was on the budget committee. I chaired the budget committee in the financial downturn. I was on several building committees. I chaired the tenure committee. I chaired the faculty, the equivalent of the faculty senate. There were many pieces of this current job that I had done in those roles. But then in my last few years at Williams, I was asked to play to play a role in the administration, which was dean of faculty, and that person oversees the academics of the institution, so all the faculty, the teaching, the curriculum, and all of the staff members who support that work. And so there were so many pieces of that of course translate very well to the role of the president.
And then you had been to Maine before you were recruited to join Bowden. How did that happen?
So my sister and I, this is the same one that I had a business with. We are still very good friends, and we try to vacation once a year together. And her son was looking at colleges. She's a little bit older, and I'm going to say a whole lot older because I know she's not watching. She likes to think she's younger than me, but she isn't. Anyway, her son was looking at colleges, and her kids were older than mine, and he wanted to look at Bowden. So we decided we were going to have our family vacation in Maine, and we rented a house in Harpswell, Maine, which exactly 10 years before I got here. And her son, that morning, I remember them saying to me, do you want to come take a look? And I said, no. I spend my life on a college campus. Why would I want to come take a look? So, and she came back really excited about Bowden, but really excited about the food. And she had brought home a cookie, a Bowden cookie from the dining hall, and said, "You've got to try this." And anyway, so that was my memory of Bowden. And when the announcement, right before the announcement came out, she lives in Dubai. I went to visit her, and we watched the home movies essentially that they had taken of the college campus, and it was amazing how it looks like Bowden, like it changes and yet it doesn't change. So
as a special treat, Safa has brought a platter of Bowden cookies with you, and you are all invited to take one on the way out, so you too can taste the magic of the Bowden dining experience. So thank you for that. Only Erin French from the Lost Kitchen has ever brought cookies to one of our events. So I would say you are in excellent company. So thank you for that. So talk a little bit about the recruitment process. It was pretty exhausting.
I think it was exhilarating. You mean
to come to
Bowden? Yeah. So it started out with essentially a phone call that said, "Are you interested?" And it's like, this
you
is such
still have those cookies? Did you say?
And in the beginning, you're like, this can't be. This just like. They wouldn't choose me. Would I do this? It's not a thing that I think many people aspire to. I certainly hadn't been sitting there thinking I really want to be a college president. But it was a really exciting possibility, and it was those early conversations with Bowden people that made me think, oh, there's something really special about them. Actually, I remember telling my husband, who, as I would get off the phone, like, okay, this is like not going to happen, but there's something really special about the people on the phone. And finally, it was him who said, like, listen to yourself. You keep saying there's something really special about the Bowden people. Go with your gut. This is a very compelling opportunity. And so they said to me, why don't you come take a look at the campus? And I came to campus. It was, they had arranged for a student to give me a tour. I was sort of incognito. They told them I was an educator from Williams. And this young woman, Bree, who I now know, she reaffirmed this idea that people came first at Bowden. The way that she told the story of Bowden was all through her friends' experiences. And that, coupled with the way in which the search committee interacted with each other. So it wasn't so much the questions they asked me, which were great questions, but it was the way that they were comfortable with each other, they joked with each other, that gave me a sense of the people at Bowden. It made it, and then of course, it's the possibility of having this kind of impact that makes it really compelling.
So the job of a college president is very complex and changing and becoming more complex each day. Talk about what some of the challenges are in your role, the things that you like the best, the things that are most important.
Yeah, so the way I think about my job is that, like, there's any boring part of it, and there really isn't, it will change in a minute, because there are so many pieces of this organization that you're paying attention to. You're paying attention to the finances. Do we have the right financial projections in place? And of course, you're leaning on people who are experts at doing these kinds of things. You're paying attention to the educational mission. You're paying attention to the students. What is their experience like? What do they think is the direction they would like to see the college go to? You're paying attention to parents and to alumni. And then, of course, our amazing faculty, who are so incredibly dedicated to the growth of our students. And then the remarkable thing, I think, about Bowden is that I think all of us think of ourselves as educators. Our staff members are so tuned to the needs of our students. So all of this, you can imagine the meetings that you have in a day. They're on very, very different topics. And if there's a challenge, it's switching, going into from the nitty-gritty financial modeling to thinking about, dining and what an amazing job. Well, it's really not hard, actually. The Bowden president has it easy in terms of dining, because dining is an example at Bowden of an institution that gets it right and understands that it's an equity issue, that having excellent food in the dining hall is a way for all of our students to come together, and not some of them, only the ones who can't afford to eat off campus. So you're paying attention to all of this, and it's coming fast and furious.
So you must have really long days. Like, describe, are you getting up at 4:30? How do you get it all done?
I believe in sleep, actually. I really do. People ask me, like, do you sleep? Yes, of course I sleep. You need to sleep. I'm a psychologist. I'll tell you why you need to sleep. So I believe in getting a good night's sleep, and then just working. So much of it is trying to work efficiently, trying to figure out the most important things that you have to do, and try to figure out the things that can wait. I think that's a big part of the job, actually, is prioritizing your work, because there are endless things to do. And the day is full of meetings, and then I try each day to find some time to spend with students, because that's what it's actually about. I need my daily dose of students is the way I think about it to myself. And so even if it's my day's full of meetings, I'll take a walk over to the dining hall, or I'll walk through the quad and spend some time with some students, or I'll go to an event in the evening. Our students put on amazing performances, and they're amazing athletes, and they're just awesome, actually.
And you have a formal program, or somewhat informal program, with students where they can sign up to have lunch with you.
Yes. So I started this when I first arrived, that we put out these invitations for students to sign up for this almost weekly lunch. And I have to say, I didn't know that whether they would or not. I remember that first day feeling really nervous, like, would they sign up to have lunch? Who knows? And how embarrassing would it be if that thing was empty? And they did sign up, and they have been showing up. I had one of these lunches yesterday, and students will come with a range of questions about, like, what does a college president do? Is one of the questions I've been asked quite a bit. Like, so what does your day look like? I wanted to ask you this thing about cognitive science. I'm really worried about this thing, or like and they also just want to talk about. One of my favorite things is they often talk about the courses that they are taking. Some of the interesting things that they're learning, and they share that with each other. So it's not necessarily just about conversations with me, but about each other. So I love that, and we'll keep doing it for as long as they keep signing up.
There's that nervousness of you show up all alone, but that doesn't happen. So
that doesn't happen.
And who wouldn't take advantage of an opportunity to have time with you like that? I think it's great that you do it consistently.
I don't know. I have to think that, like, my undergraduate self, would I have signed up to sit with the college president?
It's definitely intimidating, for sure, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I might have, yeah.
So you have so many stakeholders, obviously students, alumni, the Board of Trustees, the town of Brunswick. How do you manage all these different groups? Because they're all important constituents.
That's a really good question, and I'm working that out. But one of the things that I think all of these groups have in common is the students. So if you think about faculty and staff, their work revolves around the student experience and the student learning. If you think about parents, they are also really interested in their students. Alumni are former students. So there is a common denominator in all of these individuals, and they're linked to Bowden, and that is the student experience, and that, I think, is what grounds my work.
Just last week, you hosted a reception for the business community and community leaders in Brunswick to come and interact with you and members of the Bowden faculty. I think that's really special that you do. I've been a bunch of times. It's lovely, and I meet lots of new people.
It's a great event, and I'm so glad we do it. I think it's a reflection that we understand that Brunswick is essential to Bowden, and Bowden is essential to Brunswick, that there is really no boundary between the two. Our faculty and staff, many of them live in Brunswick. Our Brunswick residents and the larger Maine community are part of the Bowden community. They fill our stands for sporting events. They come to our talks. We need them, and we need to be a part of this amazing state.
Yeah, and the Maine State Music Theater is right on campus as well, which is
my goodness,
remarkable productions.
Remarkable productions. I got a chance to see one with my husband this summer, and my daughters take this annual trip to Broadway to see some shows, and I called them on the way home, said,
"To hell with Broadway, come to Brunswick."
Some version of that, yeah.
That's great. So you've been on college campuses for a number of years. What trends have you seen? Like, what has changed with students today versus, what they were facing 20 years ago?
So, every generation has the questions that it will face, and this generation right now is going to be graduating at a time where they have to think about the disparities in income, climate change, and how technological advances are changing the way that humans interact with each other and the world. And we're seeing that change, and that weighs, and global conflict. And we're seeing those changes weighing heavily on the students' minds. But there have been some amazing changes in the trajectory of our student bodies in this period of time. So over the last couple of decades, if you think about what has happened to Bowden and places like Bowden, we have seen our student body become, as we have gone to a need-blind model, our student body has become more diverse, both economically as well as racially and also culturally. We see students from all over the world. And I can say that as a faculty member, that change in the classroom was a profound one. And the conversations in the classroom got better. They got more, that diversity contributed to the excellence of the educational experience, and I'm so glad to see it. So there was this incredible change, and we don't often talk enough about, or we don't talk enough about the implications it had for the classroom exchange of ideas.
How do you see your role in setting the tone for a free exchange of ideas on campus?
That's such a good and timely question. So college campuses have been reeling with the implications of students who have student activism, and I will say I would rather be a president of a college where students care about the world than a president of a college where they don't. And so our students may not agree necessarily with each other all the time, and that's okay. That's actually part of this education. The thing about Bowden is that our students have been generally kind to each other. They have been respectful of each other, and I'm really proud of that. I said early on in my tenure that I won't be writing political statements. I think there's a good reason to refrain as a president from that kind of speaking for an institution, and it's precisely because we want people to have their own views and develop their own ways of thinking about complicated issues. So, yeah, so those are my thoughts on that.
Very, very timely. So Bowden's acceptance rate is 7%. What advice do you give to high school students on how best to prepare for college? Is it academic rigor? Is it community service? Is it a killer essay? How do you make it?
Okay, I'm going to give some advice, and I actually don't know whether it's good advice or not, but it's how I feel, which is that students should follow their passions. So this idea of checking boxes in order to get into school, I think misses the point of what admissions officers are really looking for, which is committed students who are going to make a difference, and you're going to demonstrate that by following the thing that you think will be impactful rather than the thing that you think will look the best on your college application.
Good advice.
It helps.
So talk a little bit about your leadership style and how you developed it.
I believe that there are leaders everywhere, all around us, in the people you work with, and that leaders are leaders in different moments, and I think that's my leadership style, is actually to pay attention to the contributions of others. There are so many we are surrounded by so many talented individuals, and I try to learn from them all the time. We all have so much to learn, and we can learn from each other, and so that's my approach. I think you have to be yourself as a leader. I've said before that, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it and be myself. If I end up losing who I am because I have to be a particular way to be president, then I don't want to be president. I want to be, I want to do this in a way that stays true to my identity.
You obviously had to have some mentors along the way. Talk about that.
So many mentors. I've had colleagues in the department where I was a faculty member. My own family, my parents were amazing. My brother and my sister, who have both passed away, were also really formative. They were really older than me. I learned so much from them. And then there are the sort of mentors along the way, the colleagues who I still learn from. You know, I feel like I have mentors at Bowden, from my senior colleagues, some of whom are in the room, from the students who I learn from. I mean, I think of mentorship as sort of not a person you have for a long period of time that you go to, but rather a series of conversation from people that you learn from.
I'm going to pivot to some of the questions that we got from the audience in advance. How do you connect with, do I say it, NESCAC?
NESCAC?
Yeah, NESCAC schools, thank you, in general.
So we have presidents' meetings. So I meet regularly with the other presidents of NESCAC schools. And
How many other NESCAC schools, roughly?
11.
Okay.
And so we get on Zoom, and we have conversations about all kinds of things, including our athletic conference. And we have regular meetings in person once a year, and we stay in contact. Speaking to other presidents is a real source of support. As you can imagine, they are oftentimes the challenges that you're facing at your institution are challenges that other people are facing, and so it's about the formal work, but it's also a little bit about camaraderie.
So it's collaborative, not competitive, except when you get on the football field.
The football field, the basketball court, right? Yes, all the other places. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very collaborative set of individuals.
That's great. What would be one or two programs at Bowden that excite you the most? That is the softball question.
That's actually a hard question.
Oh.
Because there are so many programs at Bowden, and how do you pick the ones that that get at? I will say one of the things that really drew me to Bowden was the way in which the college has put access at the top of the list. It's something that is really dear to my. I mean, you heard my story. I did not come from a background that normally would have landed you in this role. I got to this role because people opened doors for me, and I was willing to walk through them. And I am so committed to opening doors for others, and that we have the kind of financial aid program that we do at Bowden, the kind of admissions program that we do at Bowden, and that we have programs once you arrive that that try to make sure that students who come to Bowden have everything they need to get through the organization, to get through their education and beyond. Those are the things that excite me the most. So we have a Thrive program. We have a program where every student who comes to Bowden receives a laptop and an iPad. That's a game changer in terms of making a more equal, getting us to a ever more equal playing field.
How do we help people in Maine and beyond listen deeply to one another?
So I actually am so impressed with, one of the things that I've known, when I first got to Bowden, I was so impressed with how kind everybody is. The students are kind, the faculty and staff are kind. People really want to do good in the world. I've now come to know that that is a feature of Maine. That is a trait that is Maine. It wasn't obvious to me because I met Bowden first, in a sense. And so it feels obnoxious for me to give advice to this incredibly human-centric set of individuals, but I think the thing I say to students that I think I said in a couple of our convocations is that the greatest gift of a place like Bowden is our differences, and that when we lean into each other and really try to get to know each other, even when we disagree, the opportunities are so great. So this is the thing I've said to students.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How do you handle the fear of failure when taking risks in your career?
I'm not sure I do. I mean, you just like sometimes you just like bite your lip and get through it. I'm not going to pretend that this is an intimidating morning to have this kind of experience. I woke up in a kind of pure horror this morning, and yet here I am. You put one foot in front of the other, and you get through it.
Oh, well, you don't seem scared at all, and we again appreciate you being here. What inspires you?
What inspires me? Our students inspire me. They really do. They so want to change this world to make it better. If you see, one of the things about being a faculty member is that I would often be invited to things that my students were doing, to like the occasional play, to the occasional basketball game, and I would go and participate in that. As president, I see that I go a lot more. I attend many more events, and when you see the same students who are, say, working in the Orient, it's this remarkable newspaper, and I know about the classes they're taking because I taught versions of those over the years, and I also know that same kid is in a performance or in a championship winning basketball team, women's basketball team, or whatever. You see that same individual, they are so inspiring. So that's an easy one. That's a softball.
Yeah, and I also want to compliment you too on the Orient, the student newspaper at Bowden, which is so remarkable, and the students that work on it are so engaged, and many of them are summer interns with us at the Press Herald, at the Sun Journal, and we've gone on to hire some of them, and to your point, they're so curious. They do want to change the world. They're writing remarkable stories for us because they've been well schooled where they come from. So.
It was one of the. So when I found out how many of our students work at the Orient, I was terrified. Something like we have like 60 students. Out of our around 1,800 students on campus are regularly engaged in that work, and that's a remarkable number of students in a college newspaper. It might even be a little bit north of that this year. As a college president, I'm not sure that's what you want to hear, but actually, I love the fact that we really need the media in this world. We really need reporting to remain as strong and as as vibrant as it is. And when we have graduates like Evan who are taking risks to tell the stories that the world needs to hear, I couldn't be more proud. So.
Yes, we couldn't agree more with that. So thank you. What's your favorite hidden secret on campus?
Somebody asked me this the other day on campus. So I was walking home, I saw some students, and I said, "You guys look like you're up to something." And they said, "We're looking for a place to study. Do you know of a really good place?" So I know. And I think they really were looking. I don't think that's just the thing that they tell the college president. I love Hubbard Hall. I don't think it's a secret, but it is an amazing building. It has so much history. It just looks like it's been there forever. I love, that is one of my favorite buildings.
We host the Maine State Spelling Bee at Bowden at the beautiful recital hall, and every March. And for the middle schoolers who are tremendous spellers, to get up on that stage in that beautiful facility is just such a treat for them. So that's one of my favorite spots on campus.
And I'm now looking forward to attending one of those.
Oh yeah. I'll make sure you know about it. Okay. I think, let me look at my watch. I think we have time for a couple of audience questions if there are any right up front.
How do you see AI changing the college experience? graduates and Belgium, and maybe on each other how to survive what it was to
So the question is about AI and how do we see the world, how to see, what impact does it have on our graduates and what advice would you give to them? It's such a good question and something I've been thinking about for a long time given my field. So my field is sort of the edge of AI, making computational models that mimic human thinking. I think that AI is about to change the world. And I think Bowden and the kind of education that we deliver couldn't be more well positioned. Because if you think about what we're going to need in this future, when machines can output essays in a second, we need students who, on their feet, can tell the difference between a flat argument and a good argument, between misinformation and truth, between some reasonable direction, an essay that has voice and one that is voiceless. So those kinds of things are what we teach. We teach students to be critical thinkers, to be people who lean in on their humanity. We're going to need humanity. We're going to need the humanities in this next period. It's not the case that we think, okay, technologicals change, everybody then must rush into STEM. But if you think about the problems that will come, that will be derived from AI, we will need thinkers who are cross-disciplinary, who have been trained in all of the ways of knowing. So in some ways it scares me, but it also makes me more optimistic for the strength of the liberal arts. And for my kids, for our kids, I really wanted this kind of education for them. I have a daughter who graduated from Williams in 2020 and one who graduated from Middlebury in 22. And one of them actually works on AI models. But I'm so glad that they had the grounding of a liberal arts education.
Great question. Sir?
So, Bowden has a long track record of success, and as you know, the head of the organization. Often organizations will spend a lot of time analyzing mistakes they make, and not enough time analyzing why they succeeded. So, are there areas in Bowden where you feel like you understand why you succeeded and you can do it again, and are there areas where you're still working to understand? You're succeeding here, but I don't understand how, so I'm not sure how to get more of that.
That's such a good question. Actually, that in some ways defines my job, right? Is figuring out what the priorities should be. What are the things we're doing well? Why are we doing them well? What are the opportunities that we have? And I've spent this past year kind of holding myself back and saying, I will just listen and make sure that I understand where I've landed and that I don't change the things that make us special. Because there's a real danger for a person who is new to an organization to come and think, oh, I know how to make this amazing place. I'll mold it in this other form. So that's what this year has been about. And now we are starting this work of trying to figure out what are the things that we will do together and how will we build on the strengths of the institution. And you can't do that work alone. You've got to do it with stakeholders at the table. And so rather than have kind of formal strategic planning process where we come up with a plan, I'm trying to put the structures in place for us to be iterative in our planning and to set up the conversations that will allow us to define the next phase for Bowden, fully recognizing that the biggest challenge is understanding the kinds of things that you should just be careful not to fiddle with, like dining.
I didn't look over here for a question. Sir?
I believe I read in a history of higher education book many years ago that when Bowden College was being planned, there was serious talk about locating it here in Portland. but that there was concern that there was too much vice in the city and that it was adversely affecting students. Can you speculate for a minute how might things have turned out differently? Have the college have been, and have your students been protected from vice up in Brunswick?
So I see some students in the audience, and I might just refer to them about the protections from vice. But I will say I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the history of that moment. It's I can engage in the counterfactual thinking about whether how would it have turned out for Bowden if we had been in Portland, and how might that have changed? I will say. And I would need some time to think about that. It's a really interesting idea. The thing that I do love is that Portland's right here. That there's a train, that there are buses, that the fact that our students have this place to come to. I can tell you I escape to Portland quite often, just as the food, again, you think it's a Bowden thing, and yet it's a statewide thing. And I know that our students love that connection. So there is something about colleges that are somewhat isolated, relatively geographically, in the way that allows for them to grow. But I'm not enough of a historian to say more.
Okay, let's wrap up with you sharing the advice that you gave to the incoming class of 2028 at the recent convocation.
So I gave them a number of pieces of advice, and one was to lean into the differences, to just know that is the gift of Bowden, but also to resist seeing things in black and white, to understand that it's worth complicating things. It's worth digging in. It's worth listening to others who may have different opinions, even if you're going to walk away disagreeing, that those conversations are worthwhile, and to be open to the possibility. So I think one of the things that makes people, an intellectual community, intellectual, is the possibility of changing minds. If you think about education, it's about changing minds, and I think that that is what I would love to see for all of us, myself included, is to enter conversations with the possibility that your mind can be changed. One of my favorite, can I just say one of my favorite courses to teach was a course called Great Debates in Cognition. And what I loved about it is the possibility that you would engage with evidence that would change your mind on something you thought you felt very strongly about.
A wonderful place to wrap up this morning. Thank you, Safa, so much for being here and sharing your story. We are just so delighted to have you in Maine and leading Bowden. So thank you again.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks to everybody for your warm welcome. I so appreciate it.